Hello again, everyone, and welcome to this session, which is the Robert's Rules of Order session or Parliamentary Procedure. During this video, I'm going to be going over some of the basic parliamentary procedure that you need to know as a senator, as well as some intricate motions that you may not already know right now. So let's just dive onto it and we can get onto it. You can see the document that I have pulled up for you kind of outlines some of the basic motions that you'll be seeing as a senator. It's a great tool for you to utilize during Senate meetings. This may or may not be in your binder or on your laptop. So if it isn't, make sure to print out a document or put it on your laptop so that you can view it during the Senate meeting so you're easily able to follow along. But we'll go through these anyway so that you know kind of how to make these motions, the type of language to use, and then if there are any hand signals, the right hand signals to use. So I'll go through each and every single one, if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to your vice president, as they will be the point person for kind of breaking down any parliamentary procedure clarifications that you have. So the first one is the main motion, and that's not really a motion at all. That's just kind of an item that you're discussing / voting on during the Senate meeting. So a great example of a main motion is a resolution. So let's say you're voting on Senate Bill 61. You have discussion for about 15 minutes, and then it reaches the end. Then you vote on the main motion, which is the resolution. Pretty easy to get a hang of that one. The next one is adjournment. This basically just ends the meeting at the end of the meeting. So you just make motion. So someone says, "I move to adjourn." A person seconds, and then you either vote or unanimous consent is called, and the meeting is over. Typically, this is an entertained motion from the chair. When I was vice president, I typically did that, but this can also be done by a single member just motioning for it. So. The next one is an amendment. This is a very common type of motion that people can see during a Senate meeting, particularly when you're discussing resolutions. So let's say you don't like the word, let's say in a resolution, there was a word, "The administration is crazy for considering these proposals to increase fees." Well, that might not be the language that you want to pass the resolution. So you could say, "I move to amend the resolution to say the administration has made the wrong decision in considering these fee proposals." So what you would say is, "I move to amend line number," and you would look at the line number and then put the language in that you want to put in. And then from there, there would be a separate debate about it after the motion was seconded, and then ultimately it would get voted on, and if it's approved by a majority vote, then it's adopted into the resolution, and that's what the resolution would be seen as. So very simple to get down. It's one of the most common types of motions to see, and you could probably see hundreds of motions to amend throughout the live streams or the YouTube videos of Senate meetings during my year or any other year that there were videos for those Senate meetings. The next one is an amendment to an amendment, which is basically the same thing as an amendment, except you're just amending the amendment. So there's a couple of unique things to kind of note about here, and that is if you're amending an amendment, the first thing is that you can't go off into a completely random direction. So let's say you're amending a therefore clause in a resolution saying that the university should invest in electrical engineering or electrical technology for university vehicles by the year 2025. You can't make an amendment on line 5 of the sponsor line to add yourself as a sponsor line, as that would be ruled dilatory and not in line with the amendment. What you could do as an amendment to the amendment is say that the end date of the goal is 2025 to have all university vehicles be electric. You can amend that amendment and say by the year 2027, for instance. Now that would be in line with the amendment in my chairing style, but it might not be in the relevance of your vice president's chairing style. So that's something that it would be great to establish and great to ask your vice president to know what would be in line and relevant to the discussion rather than what would be ruled as dilatory. For pretty much every single vice president, that amendment would not be ruled dilatory, but the main thing to keep in mind if you're doing an amendment to an amendment is it has to be particularly relevant to the motion that's being discussed, not the resolution that's being discussed. So that's an important distinction there. This one can get a little bit tricky as the vice president is keeping 3 speakers lists, one for the main motion, one for the amendment, and one for the amendment to the amendment. So if you do this as the vice president or as a senator, you should remind the body that they're only discussing the amendment to the amendment, so that discussion isn't going all over the place when it should really only be had on one particular thing that you were motioning for. The next thing is commit or refer to. So this typically happens with resolutions again. The language to say for this is I move to commit Senate Bill, let's say Senate Bill 41, to the Relations and Affairs Committee. It gets seconded and it's a majority vote to commit the resolution or refer the resolution back to the committee at hand. So Relations and Affairs is one. If you're seeing funding requests, you can do that. Although a more common type of motion that you will see for this is a motion to send back to committee. And that may be on here later, but that is typically the motion. So another way that you could do it is I move to send the funding request for, I don't know, the music union back to the Board on Budget and Finance. It gets seconded. If a majority votes in favor of it, the Board on Budget and Finance would see it at their next Senate, or at the next board meeting. The next one is a pretty complicated one, but it's a division of the question. So this, you usually see this with resolutions, but let's say the resolution kind of has one part that you don't like, but there's one part that you do really like, in actionable therefore clauses. So let's say you want a resolution commits the university to buying electric vehicles by the year 2025, but they also commit the university to go, they commit the university to go completely carbon neutral by the year 2040. And let's say you try to amend that to make it what you want, what you like, and the amendment fails. You can then divide the question to split those two therefore clauses, and there would be two separate resolutions. It would be Senate Bill, let's say that resolution was Senate Bill 47. The first resolution with their whereas clauses and that one actionable clause would be Senate Bill 47A. And then the second one would be Senate Bill 47B. That way you could take two separate votes so that you can make your stance much more apparent on what you think on both questions. Now, obviously that's one example, and that was probably not that great of an example, but there are other instances of it, of that kind of being divided. One such instance, I think that happened a couple of years ago, was the mission statement for the university being voted on. One part of the mission statement passed, one part of the mission statement failed, I believe. And then another one was with ASUM's new motto and logo that happened, I believe, in 2017. So there are countless instances of it happening over the year, and you could probably find a couple examples during the 2018-2019 year, 2017-2018 year, and 2016-2017 year. It's pretty rare to see this type of emotion, as if there are multiple questions in a resolution, sometimes those questions would get written up in different resolutions, but it's definitely, I've seen it a couple times as a senator and a vice president, and it's definitely not uncommon to see. Okay, so the next three are going to be interruptible motions. So for the ones before, you have to get on the speakers list in order to make the motion, which involves raising your placard, the vice president writing your name down, and then recognizing you when they get to your name on the speakers list. These, you don't have to do that. And these are where hand motions come into effect. So let's take the first one, point of order. Now, this is to kind of point out to the chair of the meeting if something you feel wrong is being done. So let's say someone is speaking and you feel they're violating the rules or violating the framework that the vice president has or the chair has of decorum or diligence, just being absolutely rude to someone on the floor or not being relevant or pertinent to this discussion. I think a common one here would be if you're discussing an amendment to an amendment and someone talks about the regular resolution and the chair doesn't realize it. You can, as a senator, stick your pointer finger out or your index finger and say point of order. The chair at that time will choose to recognize you and you will state your point. And let's say we'll go with the discussion point of it again. And let's say that their discussion is relevant. You say point of order, the senator's discussion is not relevant to the question at hand. The chair would say, sustained, I agree, please keep your discussion relevant to the question and move on, or take another more appropriate action as it merits. They could also disagree with your point of order, and they could say, nope, I think their discussion is relevant, continue speaking. So the chair has the option to determine if you're right or wrong. Now, if you believe that you're right and the chair believes that you're wrong, there's another way to check back against that, which I'll get to later as another motion you can learn during parliamentary procedure. But this is one that is commonly used if you believe a senator is violating House rules, decorum, or dilatory, or it's just you feel it is operating outside of the bounds of parliamentary procedure and operating outside the bounds of ASUM policy during the Senate meeting. The next one is a point of parliamentary inquiry. And so this hand signal is pretty unique, and you stick your these three fingers out, and then you wait until the chair calls on you. So this one doesn't require any voice that you need to make. You just put the hand signal out. This is only just for answering questions about parliamentary procedure during the meeting. So this is not regular questions about the resolution. This is more questions about parliamentary procedure. So a common one could be, does this resolution need a majority vote to pass, or does this resolution need a 2/3 vote to pass? That's one common one. Another common one is, can you read the speakers list, or where am I on the speakers list? There's a couple other examples that you can go through about what a point of parliamentary inquiry is, but that's just to make sure that you're that you're still clarified about what's happening during the meeting, and that you're up to speed on the parliamentary inquiry part of it. Oh, so I actually lied. It wasn't the next three, it was the next two. So this one is postponing indefinitely. So this is actually one of the ways that you can kill a resolution for the year. And the basic way you say it is, I move to postpone whatever item indefinitely. And this is usually always a resolution. So I move to postpone Senate Bill 37 indefinitely. There's a second and there's a debate. And if there's a majority vote to postpone indefinitely, then the resolution cannot be brought up for the remainder of the academic year since it's postponed indefinitely. It can be brought up the next academic year since it's a different year Senate, but for the remainder of the year, it cannot be brought up again. So this is a very, very important vote. And it's, as I said, one of the ways to kill a resolution other than, just simply voting it down. The next one is previous question, and this is one that you may be familiar with, as it's kind of a little bit more, or people know this type of motion a little bit more than people that haven't been in parliamentary procedures. So previous question just basically ends debate. You have to get on the speaker's list in order to say it, and it's a 2/3 vote, 2/3 of people voting in the affirmative to end debate on the resolution. Important distinction there. And this is a great way to use this motion is when debate is just going way too long. Let's say you're 45 minutes into a resolution and you feel like the vice president should cap the speaker's list. You feel like this debate should go longer. You know what? I'm going to call previous question. You call previous question, it passes, and then you go straight into the roll call vote. So great way to use for that. And also helps speed up the meeting so that you're not there for 5.5, 6 hours. So it's good for that. So the next one is to ratify or confirm. And the way that you make this motion, you get on the speaker's list again, and you say, I move to approve blank. So this is done for a couple things, and there's a couple things that you need to know about this motion in particular, as it's kind of weird with ASUM House rules for only one instance. So for the first one, this is mainly just for like a committee decision. So let's say you're voting on a board on budget and finance funding request, you're voting on board on members student group recognition, or any elections decisions that you're voting on. These you can say, I move to approve blank. And it's pretty easy to go from there. You move to approve it, and then it gets, if unanimous consent is called, then unanimous consent is called, and then it's approved, or you take a vote and it's approved. And it's only a majority vote, unless the specific thing that you're voting on is 2/3, which is the second thing I'm going to get into. And that's resolutions. So you can move to approve resolutions, and it's actually in House rules that you can do this, but you can only move to approve resolutions by a unanimous vote. Now, this doesn't mean that if someone calls discussion and you can't do unanimous vote, you can still take a vote on the motion to approve, although you should really be doing a roll call vote if it's going to be that contentious. And the reason why I say sometimes for resolutions being approved by a majority vote is that some resolutions have to be approved by a 2/3 vote. And that's for amending bylaws, that's for amending fiscal policy. And then there's a couple other votes too, but the fiscal policy and bylaws are pretty important votes to remember when it's only when it's 2/3 vote. So great thing to use on pretty much everything but resolutions. If you use it on resolutions, just make sure that the resolution is pretty unanimously supported in the Senate before making the motion. The next one is a recess, and this one is pretty self-explanatory. You just want to take a break. So you say, I move for a 5-minute recess, or I move for a 10-minute recess. It gets seconded, and then if the majority of members vote, you take that amount of time for recess during the meeting. Typically the chair, or when I was vice president, I usually set the recess times. And I had a few instances of senators motioning for recess, but typically I just set the recess time. It could be different for your year. And if you feel the need during a meeting to take a break, then this option is at your disposal. The next one is a motion to reconsider. Now, this is a tricky one to understand, and it's something that is not utilized that much. So what you can do here is, let's say a resolution was voted on, and let's say it passed. We could say it passed by a narrow margin. Let's say it passed like on a 12-9 vote. They're pretty close. So right after the roll call vote on that resolution, you can say, I move to reconsider Senate Bill, let's say Senate Bill 39 was the resolution that passed 12-9. So there's a motion, and if someone seconds it, then you have a debate. And if a majority of people vote to reconsider the resolution, then the resolution is automatically entered back into debate, and then you debate it again, and then you do another roll call vote or vote at the end. So again, the motion to reconsider is sometimes debatable, and that's up to typically the chair's discretion. And usually the best time to do this motion is right after discussing another resolution, or even right after the resolution was voted on. That way you're not doing it in the middle of a resolution, and it's pretty hard for your chair to handle. So again, this is a rather rare one that I didn't see used a ton my year, but it could happen your year. So be prepared that it could happen. The next one is proviso, which is a motion that you add on something else, or you put conditions or on effect. Typically the way that I saw this is if people got either disqualified or didn't get disqualified for not turning in their campaign expense reports or violating some other elections bylaws. So you can say, I move to attach a proviso that that says that if this person, let's say candidate Y, doesn't turn in their expense report in the next 72 hours, then they're automatically disqualified from the ballot when you're discussing that item. It gets seconded, and obviously you go through discussion and you vote, and this is a majority vote again. It's typically something that you don't see on resolutions, as you can usually amend actionable clauses and therefore in resolutions, or put other actionable clauses in resolutions that can kind of usurp this, and you don't necessarily need this. But if you're discussing like elections and stuff, you can't really, it's a little bit harder to amend, so it's easier to do this instead. Okay, now this next one, I've never said the word right, no matter how long I've been vice president, so I'm gonna butcher this again, I apologize, but Seratium, I think, is the name of it. And this is basically to consider a resolution paragraph by paragraph. So again, as typical for a motion, you say, I move to consider Senate Bill 42 by Seratium. I think that's how you say it. You might want to check with your VP about how to say that. And then it gets seconded, and then it's a majority vote. So if that is approved, you go paragraph by paragraph of the item you're discussing, sometimes a resolution, sometimes something else, and you vote individually based on that. I have never seen it done, and I'm not sure if I've ever known this to be done, but it's definitely something that can happen. And it's similar to dividing the question, except these aren't, you're not breaking it up paragraph by paragraph and splitting it into like 10 documents. You're voting on it in the same document, and then if one fails, then you strike that from the resolution. So very, very interesting, to say the least. And If it gets used and you're prepared for it, good on you, but I've never seen it. This is probably the rarest motion that I've ever seen. So, okay, so the next one is another interruptible motion, and that's appealing the decision of the chair. So this is a little bit wonky how it works, and it can work in a couple ways. So the first thing is that let's say your vice president makes a decision that you don't like. So let's say that your vice president gives you an absence and a half for missing fall retreat, and you didn't like it because you felt that there was nothing you could do to get out of it. So what you would do, preferably during the vice president's report, is you would say, I move to appeal the decision of the chair, and someone would second it. Now, typically the way that I ran this was that the motioner would get an authorship, the vice president, which was me, would get a rebuttal, the seconder would get an authorship, and then I would get another rebuttal. And then there would be no discussion after that, and it would go into an automatic placard vote. If 2/3 of the Senate agreed with the motioner and voted yes to appeal the decision of the chair, then the decision would be repealed and the chair would have to choose again. So a couple instances of when this happened for me, the first one, or actually, let me think. Oh, so the biggest one was during the fall semester when I was vice president, I allowed senators to take a mental health absence. So I granted them another unexcused absence that they could have, and would instead then just transfer it as an excused absence for any mental health reasons. I decided to take that away after winter break, and in the spring semester, I just got rid of it. There were some senators that were unhappy with my decision, and they decided during my report to appeal the decision of the chair. They only got 5 yes votes, and there was like 14 no votes against it, so it didn't get appealed. But other more common ones that you'll see a little bit more often are capping the speakers list. I was a big proponent of capping the speakers list right away, and a few times it definitely got overturned. And that's the power of this motion, is to check back against the power that I have as the chair. And typically this came when we needed to amend the resolution, but no one was on the speakers list to amend it, or people were very unhappy with my decision and decided I need more time to debate this, so I want to debate this, and this is what I'm going to do. So that happened, and then it would get appealed, and then I would write down names for the speakers list again, and then based on my own discretion, I would cap it or I wouldn't cap it. So that's the most common type that you can see, but there are a wide variety of ways that you can appeal the chair, and it's something intricate that is a little interesting to learn about, to say the least. So this is one of the more common used ones that's kind of unique in a sense. So make sure there should be a few examples in the document that you're about to see about appealing the decision of the chair. Make sure to kind of listen over those, and then go from there if you feel that it's appropriate for you to appeal the decision of chair at any point in the year. The next one is limiting or extending debate. I just want to say that I found it weird that this was not, this has never been used by a senator during my time as vice president. It was usually always the chair that imposed a time limit, but basically the way that you do this is you would say, I move to limit debate time to X amount of minutes. You could also limit the amount of time people have to speak during each time that they are recognized by the chair. It gets moved, seconded, and it's a 2/3 vote this time to confirm this motion. And if it's a 2/3 vote in affirmation, then the chair has to abide by that, and they usually pull out their phone and make sure that they're on track for making the time limits work. This is a great tool to utilize if your Senate meeting is running ridiculously long. Like if you're 6.5 hours in and you still have 2 resolutions to discuss, it might be a good time to limit the debate or capping or calling previous question. Any of those tactics to kind of speed up the Senate meeting so that you're not there until 2-3 in the morning is a great, is usually a good thing to utilize during the meeting. Approving the minutes. This is basically the same as voting to ratify. So you just say, I move to approve the minutes of the April 1st, 2020 Senate meeting. Seconded. And that's that. And then the minutes correction is basically the same as a motion to amend. So again, you just say, I move to amend in the vice president's report that my name be spelled correctly. Seconded, and then it ultimately either gets voted in or it doesn't. Okay, here are kind of a few more unique ones. Some of them are less unique, but there's a few in here that are going to be very unique, and some of them I haven't seen before or seen during my time as vice president. So the first one is objecting to consideration. This is something that I have actually never seen before, but I find it odd that I've never seen this used, because I've seen some pretty poor resolutions that got voted down pretty substantially by the Senate. So this is something that you can utilize if you think something is so unpopular you just don't even want to debate it. You would interrupt the vice president while they're introducing the resolution, or right after they're introducing the resolution. You'd say, I object to the consideration of this question. There is a second, and there is no debate. The vice president says then, all right, there's an objection to consideration by Senator Blank, seconded by Senator Blank. We'll go into an immediate placard vote. If 2/3 of people vote in favor of the objection, therefore like against considering the resolution, then the resolution is automatically killed. There's no discussion on it, and the Senate moves on to the next item. It's a very unique one, and I have never seen it used in my 2 years at ASUM, but I feel like it's something that could definitely be utilized a little bit more. However, I could see how it could get a little annoying if like a resolution comes up that a senator just disagrees with, and they say, I object to the consideration of this question, and most of the Senate wants it to pass. I can see how that can get really annoying pretty quickly. So make sure if you're using this one that the item that you're speaking out, the item that you're objecting to, is very, very unpopular. The next one is table for a definitive time. So the language behind this, you can just say I move to postpone or I move to table until next week, 2 weeks after. You can set a specific date. I move to table until April 15th, 2020, or anything like that. Again, there's discussion, and it's a majority vote at the end to consider or to ratify whether you want to table or postpone for a definitive amount of time. Pretty common one. If the Senate's unhappy with resolutions, they usually do this, or they send it back to committee. Withdrawing or modifying the motion after question. I've never seen the modification part, but the withdrawing, all you have to do is you just say withdraw during the middle of discussion. This is typically used for if you make an amendment during a resolution and it's really, really unpopular, and you can see it's going to get voted down. You'll just say in the middle of discussion, withdraw. The seconder also has to withdraw. So if the seconder doesn't withdraw, then you still keep discussing the motion at hand, but you can still withdraw. And again, the seconder has to agree, so just make sure that you're that the seconder is also on board, and then that you're also making sure that you're listening to the discussion and seeing if everyone's on board with voting, or not everyone, but a lot of senators are on board with voting that amendment down. So. And then the last one, or the last two, suspension of the rules of order. You have to state the purpose. So you have to say, I move to suspend House rules. And one common one before I struck it was to consider a resolution regarding, I don't know, let's say a resolution regarding the hiring of a new commissioner of higher education. You could say that, and you could introduce that resolution, and as long as it passed by a 2/3 margin, it could be discussed. Now, you can't do that because it's against state law, but you can do other different ways of not necessarily introducing business, but going out of order during the Senate meeting or whatnot. So this is a very tricky one. It was used a lot when I was a senator. It was used it actually was used one time to suspend fiscal policy during my year. But this is something where it's a little weird to see a lot of suspending of House rules during an academic year or during a year. But it's definitely possible. It happened 3 times when I was a senator. I would honestly expect this to happen maybe 1 time during your year as a senator, but it's something to be prepared for, because when you suspend House rules, everything can go crazy. So make sure to pay attention to that. And the last one is division of the assembly. So this happens for me, the times that I usually called division of the assembly was during final budgeting or when we were voting on a funding request. Let's say the placard vote was, pretty close to whether approving this group's funding request or to approving a budget for a student group during final budgeting. One person can say after the vote count has been read, division of the assembly. This automatically makes the vote go into a roll call vote. And then after the roll call vote, the secretary reports the vote back to the chair and the chair announces it. And then you can't call division after that. So you can't call division on a roll call vote because a roll call vote is the end all be all of votes. You can really only use this on placard votes or voice votes. I had to use voice votes during the Zoom Senate meetings when we went into quarantine. But this is just something to keep in mind. If you feel like a placard vote is really, really close, or you feel members are kind of a little weirded out by their votes, it's great to call this just to buy people a little bit more time, and then they can think about their votes, or you can get an exact count of the votes, which is the purpose of the division of the assembly. The purpose is not to change your vote after you've made it, it's to make sure that there is an accurate count of votes. So there is the parliamentary procedure kind of lecture. In your transition materials, you'll see that there's a Robert's Rules of Order quick sheet. Make sure to take a look at that. That was basically the lecture I gave, but it's always good to reference either during the meeting or just looking over it during the summer so you can familiarize yourself with it. And then down here, you can see some ParliPro examples. If you just go to the ASUM YouTube channel, I'm not sure when you're viewing this in the future, how popular the ASUM YouTube channel has gotten, but make sure to just go to YouTube and search Associated Students of the University of Montana. You'll see our logo. Click on the logo, and then you can watch these videos. These videos are from dates that are pre-prescribed, so you can go to the specific timestamps that I have. These were only updated for the fall semester. So if you want to look at anything that happened during the spring semester of my academic year 2020, be my guest. This could also be when this has been updated a little bit more, and you could have different examples. Make sure to just take a look at it. The first version that I put together had amendments and resolution discussion, appealing decision of the chair, and funding requests. So not every single type of ParliPro example, but just kind of the way that meetings run and kind of how basic parliamentary procedure works in ASUM, so that you have a little bit of a leg up. When you get to Senate meetings, you kind of know how they've been run. So make sure to take a look at that. And then make sure to read this over again. And if you have any questions, make sure to reach out to your vice president with anything that they can clear up.